the Flukey Malt is basically an Ayurvedic formulation specifically designed to clear out the respiratory system and the airways. So it's very good for when there's a bit of a fever in the body as well. So we're thinking temperature in the body through feeling hot, mucus and a tightness around the chest, maybe a lot of congestion in the nasal area too. So it's mainly working with this upper half of the body. Now, the main features of when you're suffering with a respiratory disorder like a chest infection or a common cold or flu type symptoms is that there's normally a fever. Interestingly, in Ayurveda, what happens when there's a fever in the body is that it comes from the digestive fire. So normally the digestive fire is in the digestive tract, obviously, to digest the food. But when there's a fever, it starts to move out into the circulation, and that's why you start to feel hot. This is also why you lose your appetite. So it's advisable when you're suffering with this to eat a very light and easy to digest diet, so not overburdening it with heavy things, particularly things like dairy. So armour level will be pretty high too, so this is the toxins, remember. So when there's toxin in the body, it makes the channels clogged, so the body cannot function as well as it should. Things don't flow as well as they can, and that clogging creates a stagnation of things, and that build-up of toxin in the body will make it much easier for the body to catch a disorder. So something we need to think about is, why is the armour built up and why has the Agni become so lost, and like what caused us to actually catch it? So what we need to think about is the factors that are involved in taking that Agni away from us and we're not putting as much strength into it. So this is when we have a pretty busy lifestyle, when we're rushing around, we're not eating properly or giving ourselves time to look after ourselves because our mind is somewhere else. Emotional stress and trauma, these will also take away you from your central feeling, like you're into your digestive strength. And lack of proper sleep as well. So during our sleep cycle, our body rejuvenates, the organs rejuvenate, and if we're not sleeping properly, we're not allowing our body to recover. So all of these factors play into actually catching such a disorder, and then this is where the armour builds up, and this is where our fever starts to come out. And of course there's a build-up of mucus too. So this is to do with the kapha dosha. So the mucus will build up generally in the upper half of the body. Obviously with respiratory disorders, it's all to do with the lungs and the airways. So interestingly, the chest is also the site where we hold grief and strong emotions. So that's where that saying comes from, that, you know, when you've got a lot on your chest at the moment, it can have a very sunken feeling, and even do that to the body too, like when you're curved in and it's a bit defeatist. So when you're opening up the chest and allowing yourself to be brave and challenge things and take on the world, this is very powerful, not just physically, but energetically too, because your body is an expression of a level of consciousness. So when there has been grief or emotional stress, we do tend to hold it in the chest area. Now, interestingly, this is also linked to where the heart chakra is in the body, and the heart chakra is associated with the element of air. So another dosha that's very important in respiratory disorders is the vata dosha. So the kapha is bringing the mucus, the pitta will bring the fever, and the vata dosha will bring the movement. So in asthma or something like that, the vata dosha is unbalanced, and that's what causes the movement of the airways to be erratic. So the three key things that we want to do when we're having a respiratory disorder or a chest infection or a cold or a flu is exactly reversing what I've just said. So we want to reduce the armour, we want to redirect the Agni back to the digestive tract, so we're going to take the fever out of the blood system, and we're going to rid of mucus, so we need properties that will get rid of kapha and vata. And this is exactly what the Flukey Malt contains. So the Flukey Malt has this really powerful ingredient in there which I'm really raving about at the moment. It's called Maha Sudarshan, and it's basically an ingredient that gets rid of armour. But it's not your typical armour reducing herb. It actually gets rid of armour from the deep tissues. So if you know about Ayurveda already, you'll be familiar with the concept of Dhatu, which is the 7 tissues of the body. When we're talking about the first layers of the Dhatus, we're talking about the Rasa and the Rakta, so the plasma and the skin and the blood. These are more the first tissues to get nourished in the body. Then we have the deeper tissues that start going further down, like the muscle, the fat, the bone marrow, and our reproductive fluids. So these deeper tissues can accumulate armour. The armour can reside in these tissues for a long time. So what the Maha Sudarshan ingredient in the Flukey Malt does is it gets to those deep areas and gets that armour out from deep tissues. It's got Swan Makshik Basam, which is basically an ingredient to reduce fever. So we're going to get the fever out of the blood system. And then we've got Tulsi in there, which is very good for getting rid of Vata and Kapha. So Tulsi has a very sharp, penetrating action. So it's very good for, it also has an astringent quality. So it gets the mucus and the liquids out from the body and allows to cut through armour and cut through mucus. So Tulsi is very good also when you've got stomach disorders too. It's a very holy herb and it's used a lot in a religious sense. It's very good for controlling your senses. The Flukey Malt's also got licorice in there, it's also known as muleti. So licorice is very good for any type of respiratory disorder because basically it liquefies the kapha and allows it to be expelled. So in order to get rid of mucus from the body, the best way to do it is to apply heat. So when that heat is applied, the mucus can melt, because mucus is always cold if you've noticed. So once the mucus melts, then it's much easier for the body to move out, and then you won't be doing that hacking cough as much. The next ingredient in here is called Barangi, and this is a fantastic ingredient for this Flukey Malt because the definition of it allows you to have your voice return, so it brings you back to your voice. It's specifically for the respiratory system and it works very well as an expectorant. So when we're talking about expectorants, it's basically anything that gets rid of excess mucus from the chest, so it allows it to be expelled. It also increases your appetite, which is exactly what you need. So what we're doing with that ingredient too is we're redirecting the Agni back into the digestive tract so that it gets out of the circulation. So once that Agni goes back into your system, you'll start feeling hungry and be able to digest food better. Sanjivani Bati, which is also very good as an antipyretic for reducing fever. It's also an antidiuretic, so that means it gets rid of excess fluid from the body, and it's very good at reducing armour. It's also got Gugalu in there. So Gugalu is another really powerful herb in Ayurveda that basically clears channels. So it does work more with balancing the Vata dosha, so it clears things so that things can move freely. So you can see now from the ingredients and how I've explained what happens in respiratory disorders why the Flukey Malt would be very good. Another key formulation that the Flukey Malt has is Trikatu. So Trikatu is a formulation of 3 powerful herbs, black pepper, long pepper and ginger, dry ginger, that basically allow your digestive flyer to get a big whoomph. It's really good for any kapha disorder or when the digestion is very weak, to give it a really good boost. So all of the herbs also contain antiviral and antibacterial properties too. So most Ayurvedic herbs do, so that's really good. It keeps the parasites and bacteria and viruses all at bay. So Ayurvedic herbs are clever in that they provide heat to the body, but at the same time they don't cause a pitta imbalance. They allow the mucus and the armour to be expelled while at the same time balancing your Agni. So what's interesting about the chest region and the throat and all the mucus and everything, and interestingly about one of the ingredients definitions of finding your voice, is that the chest and the neck and the throat and all this region especially the heart chakra and the throat chakra. It's all to do with expression of what you're feeling in your heart. So when you're having a grief or suffering with something, you must allow that to be expressed through your voice. So have you noticed Kapha type people, Kapha constitutions, have very good voices for singing? And that's because they are able to have a grounded sense to themselves in the bottom few chakras, but also they're very connected to the heart and the throat chakra for allowing their voice to come out. So if you're suffering a lot with respiratory disorders, I want you to think about this and perhaps look at whether, if it's a recurring thing, whether you're noticing that there's something you're not expressing, and you can maybe feel a build-up of energy in this particular region. Maybe there's a lot of mucus on the chest. Think about what is it that I'm holding on to, and with a little application of heat, how can I start moving these things out? And you can definitely find a way through talking to an Ayurvedic practitioner or a good friend or a family member, or even just sitting with your journal for some time and having a good cry. Whatever it is, you shouldn't be afraid of emotion and allow it to come out of your body, because it is a beautiful expression when you allow it to be there. So in terms of how to take the Flukey malt, normally with the other malts I would say you can take it with hot water or with hot milk, but in this case I would only recommend to take it with some hot water and avoid taking it with milk. This is because dairy is very kapha promoting and it will increase the mucus in the body, so it's better that you do take it with hot water. However, if you do feel like you really need that milk for the nourishment, make sure you take it with something very heating, like a lot of ginger, some pepper, or some saffron. Be very careful pitta types with this malt, because it will be very pitta aggravating, because what these ingredients are doing is they're making the body drier. You see, when there's a respiratory infection, the body is pretty wet from the mucus, and the herbs in there will be making it drier. So when we're talking about pitta imbalances, we try to avoid making the body too dry, because it will aggravate the heat. So I would recommend to keep this if you're suffering with respiratory disorders a lot, because the Flukey malt doesn't just treat it, it will get to the root cause. And as I said, if we're looking also at the emotional side of things through grief, and releasing things from our chest, it's very good to practice those things so that you can prevent the respiratory infection from coming back in the first place. And if you have any questions, feel free to write into us, we'd be happy to answer. Thank you for watching, and look out for my next video where I'm going to be talking about the Flukey malt for joints.